Hello and welcome to this video, which is all about how to test your Canvas Power Apps. Now, Microsoft have recently released a new feature that's known as Test Studio, which is all about helping you automate those repetitive tasks to check that your Canvas Power App is ready for production use. Testing is an important part of the software development lifecycle. Testing can help ensure that quality of the app delivered to the customer. It can identify issues or defects early in the release process and provides an opportunity to fix those issues to make the app more reliable before releasing those changes. Depending on the size and the usage of the app, manual testing of new changes might be enough. However, as the app grows in complexity and usage, you might need to consider a test strategy instead of manual testing. If the app is mission critical, even small mistakes can have a significant impact. Increased app changes can result in longer testing cycles, and actually sometimes testing of the app itself might become longer than the time spent to develop those new features. In a fast-paced development, thoroughly testing every feature in the app becomes a bit of a bottleneck to releasing those software updates. One option is to reduce the time taken during a test cycle, and on regression testing is test automation. Test automation can help you test your app with minimal effort, reducing testing time and identifying critical issues before release. PowerApps Test Studio is a low-code solution to write, organize, and automate tests for Canvas apps. In Test Studios, you can create and write tests using PowerApps expressions, or use a recorder to save app interactions automatically generated, and then that converts them into expressions. You can play written tests back with the Test Studio to validate app functionality, and also run those tests in a web browser and build the automated tests into your app deployment process. Before we jump in and take a look at the actual demonstration, there's some terminology that you'll need to know before you get started using the Test Studio. The first terminology that you might see is test cases. Now, these are made up of series of instructions or actions called test steps. Now, test cases are executed to validate that your app or specific features in your app is working as you expect. For example, in an expense app, you would like to ensure that only expenses with associated actual costs can be submitted. A test case can help verify that this condition or requirement is always met. In Test Studio, test steps are written using the PowerApps expression language. Test expressions can consist of both functions available when building your app and additional expressions to support automated testing. Take a look at our recent PowerApp example of the month for an expense request app. And this will show you some of the examples that we're going to take a look at later in this video. Now, the second terminology that you would want to get your head around is the test suites. Now, these are used to organize or group test cases together. As the number of test cases in the app grows, you might consider organizing the test cases in specific features or functionality. For example, you might have one test suite with test cases to validate expense report submissions and another test suite that focuses just on expense approvals. Test cases contained in test suites are run sequentially. The app state is persistent across all test cases in the suite. For example, if you have a test case that completes on screen 5 in your app, the next test case in your test suite will begin running from screen 5. It allows you to break down a complex test scenario into multiple test cases within a single suite, and that state is shared across all the test cases. If your second test case expects to begin at the start screen of the app, you can navigate to the screen as the first step in your test case. It's important to remember that the app is not reloaded at the beginning of every test case in a test suite when planning your test execution. The third term to be aware of is test assertions. Every test case should have an expected result. To validate the expected result of a test against the actual result of your test, you can write test assertions. An assertion is an expression that evaluates either true or false in the test. If the expression returns false, the test case has failed. In the example of the expense request system, you can write an assertion to validate whether an expense report is created with an expense line item having zero cost associated, as an example. Now I'm just going to jump into my example expenses Canvas Power App. Now, to access the Test Studio, first I just need to click on the Advanced button on the left-hand side, and then I click on the Open Tests. Now, if this is the first time that I'm going to be going into here, I will get a message that will pop up to say that test may not work properly if the formula level error management setting is disabled. So it's asking me to go into the app settings to turn that on. So by clicking on there, I can go into my settings, go under upcoming features, and then under experimental, I'm then going to turn on the formula level error management. Once I've done that, I can then come out of here, go back to my tests, and when I click on open, it's automatically going to open my test studio for me. Now you can see on the left hand side, it's automatically created a suite and it's got a case inside of it already ready to go. Now I can start actually either entering my own steps into here, or I can actually record my screen for it to automatically create those test cases for me. So I click on record and it's going to load up my app. Obviously the first time I'm just doing this, so it's just going to ask me to sign in. Now that I'm all signed in, here's my app. Now everything I do from this point onwards now is going to start recording. So you notice as I click on the button across the top to create a new expense report, it's now added a line into my case. So I can specify, for example, I might want my start date at the beginning of the month. So we'll select on the 2nd and the end date to be on the end of the month. And then I might want to give my report title. So I might want to say this is my August expense request. I could enter an approver into here if I like. So I'm going to enter into here, Hugh, and then I'll click on create. Now that will then create me my my expense report, and if I'm happy with that as my test, I can now click on the done button, which is just off screen across the bottom down here, and that's now created me my case tests. So all I now need to do, if I want to then watch what that happens was that test runs again, I can click on the play button across the top and click on publish. This might just take a second. But once it's published, I can click on the play button. Oh, I just need to publish that again. And then once it's published, it will automatically start playing for you. So you can see now it's moving through the app, and you can see it's getting all ticks along here as it's changing the data. You'll shortly see it'll start adding in the data that I've added into the app, and then click on create. It'll automatically do that for me, and now it's created that report and it's gone all the way through and everything has been a complete success. Now all of that is then transformed into these expressions in here, which is all using the same low code as normal kind of PowerApps formulas are. So it's nice and easy to change if you want to update this. Maybe you wanted to put something at the very end, which is going to patch those results directly into, say, a SharePoint list or an Excel spreadsheet, which I can then export. The other thing which I find really cool about this as well is that all of these cases and suites of tests are stored inside of the Canvas app, meaning if you were to move it between different environments or even between different tenants, then those cases and those suites of tests will stay with the app. There's a few best practices to think about before you get started using the Test Studio inside of Canvas apps. The first is to determine which test cases should be automated. So it's difficult to automate all tests, and we do not recommend that you completely rely on all test automation. Manual testing should be performed in addition to test automation, but tests that are best suited to be automated are things like repetitive tasks or high business impact functionality tests, features that are stable and not undergoing any significant change, features that require multiple data sets, or manual testing that takes a significant amount of time. The second thing to take into consideration is to keep your test cases small, and you don't want them to take too long to actually run through. Keep the expressions to a single test action is another good point. Also, every test case should have an expected result. So basically, you should know whether it's going to come out as true or false. And that will actually then determine whether or not it's been a successful test or not. And then finally, make use of test suites. So for maintenance and grouping or categorizing similar test cases together, it makes it much easier to describe the purpose and the overall expected results of that particular test if it's all grouped together inside of a particular suite. And the final thing that I want to talk to you today about is the known limitations. Now, these are the known limitations of the Test Studio at the time of recording. So do check in with the Microsoft web pages and see what functionality is being updated, because it's always being updated, as we know. And although work is always in progress to ensure that full control coverage in PowerApps Test Studios is going ahead, the following functionality at the time of recording is still currently unavailable. So around components, code components that are written in the PowerApps component framework, nested galleries, media controls, formula level error management, experimental feature needs to be turned on for the app to actually work, support for the controls not listed in the select and set property functions, and the person type columns can also have some issues as well. So keep all of that in mind when it is that you're getting started using the Test Studio. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you need help, we do offer professional services, including bespoke development, training packages, and pay-as-you-go support that can bridge those knowledge gaps within your current team. You can email me at dougie@valto.co.uk, and we also offer free consultations to discuss your specific requirements. We'll then give you a no obligation quote. If that sounds good, I hope to hear from you soon.